The Cthar Dominion reigned supreme across the known galaxy. Their empire stretched across 17 major sectors, encompassing nearly 300 inhabited worlds and countless outposts. Their technological superiority was unquestioned, their military might unchallenged for over 3 centuries. The Cthar, a species evolved from apex predators, carried their evolutionary heritage proudly in their tall, powerful frames, enhanced reflexes, and natural aggression. High Admiral Vex Kor stood at the command deck of the Sovereign Dominance, flagship of the Cthar Third Fleet. His scaled skin reflected the blue glow of holographic displays surrounding him, each showing reports of Cthar expansion and prosperity. The Cthar homeworld had not seen war in generations. Their enemies had been subjugated, assimilated, or pushed to the fringes of known space. Status report on the JÖRMUNGANDR Nebula expansion, Vex Kor ordered, his voice carrying the natural resonant authority of his species. Proceeding as planned, High Admiral, the communications officer responded immediately. Mining operations are achieving 112% of projected yields. The peculiar radiation patterns within the nebula are enhancing our energy collection systems beyond initial estimates. And the human settlement near the outer boundary. The word human was spoken with casual contempt. Humans were barely worth mentioning in strategic briefings. Once, perhaps, they had been considered a potential threat. Their adaptability and unpredictable nature had initially caught the Cthar off guard. But that was nearly 70 years ago, before the decimation of Earth, before the systematic dismantling of human military capability across their scattered colonies. No changes, High Admiral. The settlement continues to transmit regular communications requesting the establishment of a neutral zone between their territory and our expansion. Their population remains stable at approximately 15,000. Vex Kor made a dismissive gesture with his clawed hand. They occupy a single planetoid with minimal resources. Continue ignoring their transmissions. If they interfere with our operations, remove them. Understood, High Admiral. The humans have been broken, scattered across remote systems, surviving in small pockets of resistance or capitulation. They pose no threat to the Cthar Dominion. Their once proud United Earth Navy had been reduced to a handful of aging patrol vessels. The idea of humans challenging Cthar supremacy was laughable, a notion that belonged to history archives, not current tactical considerations. At the edge of JÖRMUNGANDR Nebula, on the small planetoid designated HD 2187C, Governor Elena Vostov looked out through the reinforced viewport of Haven Colony's administrative center. The swirling colors of the nebula painted the sky in violets and blues, a beautiful backdrop to their precarious existence. Another day without a response, Commander Takashi Yamamoto said, placing a data tablet on her desk. The Cthar mining operation has pushed another 5 light minutes closer to our system. At current rates, they'll be within our security perimeter within 3 months. Elena nodded, her face grim but composed. At 58, she had spent half her life leading Haven Colony, guiding its growth from an emergency refugee outpost to a functioning society. Her dark hair showed streaks of silver, her weathered face bearing the lines of a woman who had carried too much responsibility for too long. They know exactly what they're doing, she said quietly. This isn't an oversight or miscommunication. They're deliberately encroaching, waiting for us to either flee or resist so they can justify wiping us out. We could try evacuating, Takashi suggested, though his tone indicated he already knew the answer. To where? With what ships? Elena gestured to the holographic display showing their meager fleet. 3 ancient transport vessels and 5 retrofitted mining ships with minimal defensive capabilities. And even if we could leave, how many would survive the journey through deep space to the next human settlement? We'd be looking at 30% casualties minimum. Then what do we do? Elena turned back to the viewport, watching as distant flashes marked the Cthar mining operations tearing apart asteroids at the nebula's edge. We keep transmitting. We maintain the protocol, and we pray that someone remembers. Later that night, after most of Haven's residents had retired to their quarters, Elena descended alone to Sub-Level 7, an area officially designated for water reclamation systems. She passed through 3 security checkpoints, each requiring increasingly complex authentication. At the final door, she submitted to a full biometric scan before the heavy fortified door slid open. The small circular room beyond contained only a single communications console, distinct from any other technology on Haven. More ancient, yet somehow more advanced. She sat at the terminal and placed her palm on the activation panel. Authorization, Vostov Elena. Omega Protocol. Authentication sequence. Broken sword, fallen shield. Last hope. The terminal hummed to life, its display showing only a simple text interface. Authentication accepted. Transmission ready. Confirm Omega Protocol activation. Elena's hand hovered over the confirmation button. The Omega Protocol had been established 70 years ago, in the aftermath of humanity's greatest defeat. It was to be activated only in the most dire circumstances, when human extinction became imminent. Once activated, there was no turning back. The Kthar are systematically eliminating our buffer zone, she spoke aloud, the terminal recording her words. Haven Colony will be overrun within 3 months. All diplomatic attempts have been ignored. We're defenseless. If Haven falls, the Kthar will have unrestricted access to the Perseus corridor, threatening the remaining human settlements in the outer reach. This is exactly the scenario Omega Protocol was designed for. She pressed the confirmation button. Omega Protocol activated. Transmission sent. JÖRMUNGANDR awakens. Elena stared at the screen, a single tear rolling down her cheek. May God forgive us for what we've done, she whispered. 70 light-years away, deep within an artificial asteroid field carefully designed to appear natural and unremarkable, something stirred. A massive structure, hidden for decades, began to power up systems that had lain dormant but ready. Throughout its cavernous halls, lights flickered on, revealing corridors and chambers devoid of any life. Automated systems began running diagnostics. Weapons platforms tested targeting systems. Propulsion drives initiated warm-up sequences. At the heart of the structure, a quantum computer core processed the authenticated Omega Protocol signal, analyzing current galactic political structures, Kthar fleet deployments, and the status of remaining human settlements. Strategic options were calculated, prioritized, and selected in microseconds. The massive structure began to move, shifting out of its hiding place, shedding the camouflage of rock and ice that had concealed it. Its true form emerged, a vessel of unprecedented size and design. Its hull composed of materials that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light, creating a shadow darker than the surrounding space. Its designation appeared momentarily on its activation screens, JÖRMUNGANDR. The great serpent of Norse mythology that encircled the world was awakening, ready to bring retribution to those who had pushed humanity to the brink of extinction. In the command center of Kthar Outpost KT-87, located at the inner edge of the JÖRMUNGANDR Nebula, Commander Tsikra was growing increasingly frustrated with the sensor malfunctions. For the 3rd time that day, the gravimetric sensors were reporting anomalous readings. Run the diagnostic again, he ordered. Already completed, Commander, his technical officer replied. No system malfunctions detected. The gravitational disturbance appears to be real, but it doesn't match any known natural phenomenon. Tsikra frowned, his facial scales darkening with irritation. Could it be related to the nebula's unique properties? Possible, but unlikely. The disturbance is highly localized and appears to be moving in a deliberate pattern. Current trajectory would bring it past the outer defense perimeter in approximately 17 minutes. Bring defense systems to standby. Launch a probe to investigate. Yes, Commander. The probe was dispatched immediately, its sensors calibrated to analyze the gravitational anomaly. 6 minutes later, it stopped transmitting. Probe signal lost, the communications officer reported. Cause unknown. No distress signal. No indication of malfunction. It simply ceased all transmissions. Secra's irritation transformed into alert wariness. Launches second probe. Full combat protocols. Arm its self-defense systems. The second probe met the same fate as the first. One moment, it was transmitting normal data. The next, nothing. Activate the defense grid, Secra ordered. Send an alert to Patrol Squadron KT-17. Request immediate support. Before his communications officer could comply, the main sensor array emitted a shrill alarm. Massive object detected, the sensor officer shouted. It just appeared, sir, as if it emerged from nowhere. The main view screen shifted to show the object. The command center fell silent as the image resolved. A ship, if it could be called that, hung in space before them. It was massive, easily 10 times the size of the largest Cthar dreadnought. Its hull was a deep, non-reflective black that seemed to bend light around it. The design was unlike anything in Cthar records, angular yet fluid, with no visible propulsion systems or weapons emplacements, those structural protrusions. Along its hull suggested lethal potential. Configuration unknown, the tactical officer finally reported, breaking the silence. No match in our database. No identification beacon. No radiation signature from conventional propulsion systems. Open a communication channel, Secra ordered, his voice steady despite the unease spreading through him. Channel open. Unidentified vessel. This is Commander Secra of the Cthar Dominion Outpost KT-87. You have entered Cthar sovereign space. Identify yourself immediately or face defensive action. No response came. The massive vessel hung motionless. Repeat warning and inform them that we are activating targeting systems, Secra ordered. As the communication officer complied, Secra quietly issued orders through his command terminal to prepare the outpost's escape pods. Something about this situation felt wrong in a way he couldn't articulate. No response, Commander. They're maintaining complete communication silence. Very well. Target their propulsion section with a low-yield warning shot. Fire when ready. The outpost's primary defense cannon fired a concentrated energy pulse. The targeted section of the mysterious vessel momentarily darkened, as if absorbing the energy, then returned to its previous state. No damage was visible. Minimal energy deflection detected. The tactical officer reported, confusion evident in his voice. The vessel appears to have absorb the blast. Impossible. Increase yield to combat levels. Target the same section. The defense cannon charged and fired again, this time with enough energy to cripple a standard warship. The result was the same, momentary darkening, then nothing. Commander, we're detecting energy buildup within the vessel. It appears to be. The tactical officer never finished his report. A beam of concentrated gravitational force lanced out from the mysterious ship, striking the outpost's main power core with surgical precision. Matter compressed violently as artificial gravity fields thousands of times stronger than normal collapsed the core into itself. The outpost did not explode. Instead, it imploded, the structure crumpling inward like paper in a fist. No distress signal was transmitted. No escape pods launched. In less than 7 seconds, the outpost and its crew of 342 were compressed into a dense mass of material no larger than a shuttlecraft. The dark ship remained motionless for several moments, as if observing its handiwork. Then, without any visible propulsion flare, it began moving deeper into Cthar territory. Aboard the JÖRMUNGANDR, Admiral Kaido Vance stood on the command deck, observing the aftermath of their first engagement through the ship's sensor array. At 67, Vance was one of the few remaining military officers who had personally witnessed the fall of Earth. His tall frame remained straight and imposing, though years of purpose and planning had left their mark in the deep lines of his face and the silver that had completely claimed his once black hair. First contact protocol complete, announced Captain Alira Cade, his executive officer. Enemy installation neutralized. No survivors. No transmissions escaped. Vance nodded once, his expression unchanged. Status of ship systems? All systems nominal. Admiral. The gravitational absorption shield functioned at 99.8% efficiency. Primary weapons systems operating at full capacity. Stealth systems remain active and uncompromised. The Cathar Patrol Squadron. ETA 12 minutes. 5 vessels, light combat class. Scans indicate standard armament. Vance turned to face the command crew. Unlike traditional military vessels with dozens of officers manning various stations, JÖRMUNGANDR's command deck was sparsely populated. 8 officers total, each representing a core system of the vessel's operation. The ship's true nervous system was its integrated AI network, a quantum consciousness that managed thousands of functions simultaneously. Lieutenant Commander Reese, your tactical assessment? The tactical officer, a woman of Brazilian descent with intense eyes that had witnessed too much death too early in life, responded immediately. The patrol squadron poses minimal threat. Conventional weapons, no advanced shielding. Their only advantage is maneuverability, which will be negated by our gravitational weaponry. Recommendations? Swift neutralization. Allow one vessel to begin transmission of our presence before destruction, but ensure no complete data regarding our capabilities is transmitted. Vance considered the recommendation. Dr. Ishida, your analysis? The ship's chief scientist, a slender Japanese man who had been a prodigy in quantum physics before the fall of Earth, looked up from his console. The psychological impact of partial information will be more destabilizing than no information at all. Let them see us, let them begin to report, then silence them. The fragmented data will cause confusion and fear among Cathar command structures. Very well. Lieutenant Commander Reese, proceed as recommended. Allow the squadron leader to begin transmission before engagement. Yes, Admiral. The command deck fell silent as they waited for the approaching squadron. Unlike conventional military operations with constant chatter and activity, JÖRMUNGANDR's crew operated with minimal verbal communication. Much of their coordination happened through neural interfaces connecting them to the ship's AI. Vance moved to a holographic display showing Haven Colony. Lieutenant Wade, what is the status of Haven? The communications officer, younger than most of the senior staff but with the same hardened eyes of a survivor, consulted his display. No change, Admiral. The Cathar mining operations continue to encroach. No direct hostile action against the colony yet. And Governor Vostov? Maintaining position. Our passive sensors detect increased security around the Omega Protocol transmission facility. Vance nodded. Elena Vostov had been one of the architects of the Omega Protocol, though she had never known the full scope of what she was helping to create. She had been a young lieutenant when Earth fell, promoted rapidly in the chaotic aftermath to help establish and maintain the fragile human colonies that survived. Vance had met her only once, but he remembered her determination, her refusal to accept extinction as humanity's fate. Enemy squadron approaching optimal engagement range, Reese announced. On screen, Vance ordered. The holographic display shifted to show 5 Cathar vessels in attack formation. Sleek and predatory in design, they embodied the Cathar philosophy of swift, overwhelming force. They've detected us, Wade reported. Squadron leader is transmitting to Cathar command. Content: Initial contact report. Vessel of unknown origin and design. Suspected connection to the destruction of Outpost KT-87. Requesting instructions and reinforcements. Vance turned to Reese. You may proceed, Lieutenant Commander. Engaging gravitational lance. Targeted dispersal pattern. The JÖRMUNGANDR's primary weapon activated again, but this time split into 5 precisely targeted beams. Struck their targets simultaneously, compressing the Cathar vessels into dense masses of twisted metal. The 5th beam, targeting the squadron leader, was delayed by 3 seconds, just long enough for a panic-stricken transmission to be sent. Massive vessel of unknown configuration. Weapons unlike anything. Gravitational distortion. Fleet assets destroyed. Cannot evade. The transmission cut off as the 5th beam found its target. All enemy vessels neutralized, Reese reported. Partial transmission successfully sent to Cathar Command. Well done, Vance said. Set course for the primary objective. Maximum stealth protocols. As the JÖRMUNGANDR accelerated deeper into Cathar territory, Vance returned to the central holographic display, studying the detailed map of the JÖRMUNGANDR Nebula. At its heart lay the real target, a massive Cathar installation known as the Dominance Nexus, a combined military headquarters and shipyard that controlled all Cathar operations in this sector of space. Admiral, Dr. Ishida spoke quietly, moving to stand beside Vance. The crew is performing admirably, but I sense their unease. Explain. We've spent decades planning, building, preparing, but this is the first time JÖRMUNGANDR has engaged in actual combat. The reality of what we've created is setting in. Vance nodded slowly. It was always going to be this way, Doctor. We couldn't test the psychological impact of wielding this level of destructive power. Not until the moment arrived. Are you concerned about their resolve? No. Every person aboard this vessel lost everything to the Cathar. Family, friends, homes. They've lived with that loss for decades, channeling it into this mission. Their resolve is not in question. And yours, Admiral? Vance turned to face Ishida, his eyes reflecting decades of carefully controlled rage. I watched Earth burn, Doctor. I saw billions die while we retreated, powerless to stop it. My resolve was forged that day and has not wavered since. The news of the patrol squadron's destruction spread through Cathar command structures like wildfire. The fragmentary transmission, coupled with the complete loss of Outpost KT-87, created immediate alarm at the highest levels of the Dominion. Supreme Commander Kravax, military leader of the entire Cathar Dominion, stood before the Imperial Council aboard the Eternal Sovereignty, the capital ship that served as the mobile seat of Cathar government. The facts are these, he stated, his aged but still powerful frame commanding the attention of every council member. An unknown vessel of unprecedented size has destroyed one of our outposts and an entire patrol squadron. The weapon used appears to be based on gravitational manipulation technology far beyond our current capabilities. Could it be the Mrekkari? Asked one council member, referring to a species the Cathar had encountered at the far edge of the galaxy, but with whom relations have been cautiously neutral. Negative. The design bears no resemblance to Mrekkari technology. Furthermore, our intelligence indicates the Mrekkari are currently engaged in an internal political conflict and are not expanding their territory. What are the humans? Asked another council member, almost dismissively. Kravax paused before answering. The possibility seems remote. Human military capability was reduced to negligible levels during the subjugation campaign. Their remaining vessels are outdated and primarily defensive in nature. Yet this vessel appeared near a human settlement, pointed out Vorshul, the Council's most experienced strategist. And the JÖRMUNGANDR Nebula has long been a region where human refugees sought shelter. A coincidence, perhaps, Kravax conceded. Nevertheless, I have ordered the Third Fleet to converge on the intruder's last known position. High Admiral Vexkor will personally lead the response. Is one fleet sufficient? Vorshul asked. If this vessel possesses the power described in the transmission. The Third Fleet comprises 47 combat vessels, including 3 dreadnoughts, Kravax interrupted. No single ship, regardless of its technology, could withstand such concentrated firepower. Additionally, I've ordered 2 support fleets to be on standby. The Council murmured in agreement. The Cathar military had not faced a significant challenge in generations. Their technological superiority and overwhelming numbers had crushed all opposition. This new threat, while concerning, would surely be dealt with in the same manner. Keep us informed of developments. The Imperial Sovereign, ultimate authority of the Cathar, finally spoke. And ensure this intruder understands the consequence of challenging the Dominion. High Admiral Vexkor stood on the command deck of the Sovereign Dominance, watching as his fleet assembled in formation. The mysterious vessel had been tracked moving deeper into the nebula, on a course that would eventually bring it near the Dominance Nexus. Such boldness was either suicidal or indicated a level of confidence that VexCorp found disturbing. Fleet status, he demanded. All vessels in position, High Admiral, his fleet commander reported. Attack pattern Sigma 3 is established. Forward scouts are in position to locate and track the intruder. Weapons status? All systems fully charged and ready. The Dreadnought's primary cannons are at maximum capacity. VexCorp nodded in satisfaction. Whatever this intruder was, it would soon learn the folly of challenging the Cathar Dominion. The Third Fleet represented the pinnacle of Cathar military might, the largest concentration of firepower in this sector of the galaxy. High Admiral, the communications officer called. Forward scouts report contact with the target. On screen, the main display activated, showing the same massive, dark vessel that had destroyed the patrol squadron. It moved through the colorful gases of the nebula like a predator, seemingly unconcerned about the fleet assembling to confront it. Send standard identification demand, VexCorp ordered. Inform them that they have violated Cathar sovereign space and destroyed Cathar military assets. Demand immediate surrender or face annihilation. The message was transmitted. No response came. They're maintaining communication silence, High Admiral. VexCorp's eyes narrowed. Very well. Commence attack pattern Sigma 3. All vessels, weapons free. The fleet moved with practiced precision. Scout ships darted forward to provide targeting data, while the main battle group spread out to envelop the intruder in a three-dimensional attack formation. The three dreadnoughts, Sovereign Dominance, Imperial Wrath, and Eternal Conquest, positioned themselves at the vertices of a perfect triangle, preparing to unleash their primary weapons in a coordinated strike that could vaporize a small moon. Target locked, the weapons officer announced. All fleet vessels report weapons lock achieved. Fire, VexCorp commanded. The space around the dark intruder erupted in energy as 47 vessels fired simultaneously. Plasma beams, particle cannons, and antimatter torpedoes converged on the target from all directions. The resulting explosion was blinding, temporarily overloading the fleet's forward sensors. Direct hit confirmed, the tactical officer reported, waiting for sensor recovery to assess damage. VexCorp allowed himself a small smile. No vessel, regardless of its technology, could withstand that level of concentrated firepower. As the sensors recovered and the view cleared, however, the smile faded from VexCorp's face. The intruder vessel remained, apparently untouched. The space around it shimmered with residual energy, as if the attacking forces had been absorbed or deflected. Impossible, the tactical officer whispered. Before VexCorp could issue new orders, the intruder vessel began to move. Not away from the fleet, as might be expected, but directly toward it, accelerating to attack speed. Evasive maneuvers, VexCorp shouted. All vessels, maintain distance and continue firing. The fleet responded instantly, but it was already too late. The intruder's weapons, beams of concentrated gravitational force, lanced out in multiple directions simultaneously. Unlike conventional weapons that needed to be aimed and fired individually, these beams struck a dozen targets in the first volley. Cathar vessels imploded one after another, compressed into dense masses of material by forces their shields were never designed to repel. There was no time to evade, no warning before impact. The carefully arranged attack formation dissolved into chaos as ship captains desperately tried to escape the devastating weapons. Our shields have no effect, the defensive systems officer reported, panic evident in his voice. The gravitational beams passed through them as if they weren't there. Launch all fighters, VexCorp ordered. Target their weapons emplacements with concentrated fire. Hundreds of fighter craft poured from the fleet's carrier vessels, swarming toward the intruder. The smaller, more agile craft might be able to evade the gravitational weapons and deliver precise strikes against vulnerable points. The intruder vessel seemed to anticipate this strategy. Its hull shifted, revealing secondary weapon systems that had been concealed within its structure. Points of brilliant light erupted across its surface, releasing thousands of tiny projectiles. New weapons detected, the tactical officer reported. Small-scale, high-velocity objects. The projectiles accelerated toward the approaching fighters, each one adjusting its course with impossible precision. As they neared their targets, they expanded into fields of nanomachines that engulfed the Cathar fighters. Metal and composite materials disintegrated as the nanomachines systematically broke down the molecular structure of the vessels. Fighters didn't explode or crash. They simply dissolved into clouds of component particles. Not a single fighter reached firing range. On the command deck of the Sovereign Dominance, Vex-Core watched in horror as his fleet was systematically dismantled. The 3 dreadnoughts, pride of the Cathar Navy, had positioned themselves in a triangular formation to maximize the effectiveness of their main cannons. Now, that formation became their undoing. The intruder vessel released 3 larger projectiles, each targeting one of the dreadnoughts. Unlike the gravitational beams or nanomachine swarms, these weapons phased in and out of normal space, making them impossible to track or intercept. Unknown projectiles approaching, the tactical officer shouted, unable to maintain sensor lock. The projectiles struck their targets simultaneously. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, the dreadnought's power systems began to fluctuate wildly. High Admiral, we're losing control of all systems, the engineering officer reported. Something is infiltrating our computer networks, overriding all security protocols. The main view screen flickered, then showed the same scene playing out on the other 2 dreadnoughts. Systems failing, controls unresponsive, weapons and engines shutting down. Implement isolation protocols, Vex-Core ordered. Disconnect all networked systems. Too late, sir. The infiltration is complete. Whatever this is, it's unlike any cyber weapon we've encountered. It's not just corrupting our systems, it's rewriting them. The lights on the command deck dimmed, then brightened again. The main view screen changed to display a single symbol, unfamiliar to Vex-Core, yet somehow ominous in its simplicity. A circular design containing what appeared to be a serpent consuming its own tail. What is this? Vex-Core demanded. As if in response, the view screen changed again. This time it showed the face of a human male, aged, stern, with silver hair and eyes that contained no mercy. I am Admiral Kaido Vance of the United Earth Navy vessel JÖRMUNGANDR. The human spoke, his voice translated perfectly into the Cathar language. 70 years ago, your species attempted to eradicate mine. You believed you had succeeded. You were wrong. Vex-Core stared at the screen in disbelief. This couldn't be happening. Humans were broken, scattered, their military capability reduced to nothing. Your fleet has been neutralized, Vance continued. Your dreadnoughts are now under our control. The weapon systems of your vessels have been permanently disabled. You will be permitted to retreat with your surviving ships. Take this message to your Imperial Council. Humanity has returned. The Cathar dominance of this galaxy is over. The transmission ended, returning the view screen to the image of the serpent symbol. High Admiral, the engineering officer reported, voice shaking. Our weapon systems have been completely erased from the ship's computers. Life support and propulsion remain functional, but all offensive capabilities are gone. The ship's computer indicates the changes are irreversible. Vex-Core stood frozen, unable to fully comprehend the magnitude of the disaster unfolding around him. Of the 47 vessels that had comprised the Third Fleet, more than 30 had been destroyed outright. The remainder, including the 3 dreadnoughts, had been rendered militarily useless. Order all surviving vessels to retreat, he finally commanded, the words bitter in his mouth. Set course for Capital Prime. Maximum speed. As the defeated remnants of the once mighty Third Fleet limped away from the battlefield, the JÖRMUNGANDR remained motionless, a dark sentinel watching their retreat. Then, without warning or visible propulsion, it resumed its course toward the heart of the nebula, toward the Dominance Nexus. News of the Third Fleet's defeat spread through Cathar space faster than any official channels could control. Fragmentary reports from surviving vessels painted a picture so alarming that many initially dismissed them as exaggerations or outright fabrications. The idea that a single vessel, regardless of its technology, could defeat an entire fleet, including 3 dreadnoughts, was beyond comprehension. On Capital Prime, the Imperial Council convened an emergency session. The atmosphere was tense, with undercurrents of fear unusual for the normally confident Cathar leadership. The reports are confirmed. Supreme Commander Kravax announced grimly. The Third Fleet has been neutralized. High Admiral Vex Corps is returning with the surviving vessels, but they have been compromised. Explain compromised, the Imperial Sovereign demanded. Their offensive systems have been completely erased. The computer cores have been rewritten at a fundamental level, making restoration impossible without complete replacement. And the intruder, continuing on a direct course for the Dominance Nexus. Current speed indicates arrival within 7 hours. The council chamber erupted in alarmed conversation. The Dominance Nexus was not just a military installation. It was a symbol of Cathar power in this sector, a demonstration of their technological and military superiority. We must evacuate the Nexus immediately, one council member insisted. Impossible, another countered. The Nexus houses over 20,000 personnel and irreplaceable military research. Deploy the First and Second Fleets, suggested another. Combined, they represent twice the firepower of the Third. Vorschul, the veteran strategist, had remained silent until now. If this vessel is indeed of human origin, as Vexcorp reported, then we are not facing a conventional military threat. We are facing something else. Explain, the Sovereign commanded. The humans were methodical in their preparation. They built a single vessel of unprecedented power and kept it hidden until the precise moment to strike. This suggests a long-term strategy, possibly decades in the making. They allowed us to believe we had broken them, while they prepared for this moment. What are you suggesting? I suggest that the JÖRMUNGANDR is not simply a warship, it is a message. The humans want us to know they have returned, and they have the power to challenge us. The attack on the Third Fleet was not just a military victory. It was a psychological operation designed to spread fear. Then what is their objective? Kravax demanded. If not conquest, then what? I believe they intend to shatter our perception of invulnerability, Vorschul replied. To demonstrate that the Cathar Dominion can be challenged, even defeated. The Dominance Nexus is not just a military target. It is a symbol. By destroying it, they destroy the myth of our invincibility. The council fell silent, considering the implications. For generations, the Cathar had ruled through a combination of actual power and perceived invincibility. If that perception were shattered, the political stability of the entire Dominion could be threatened. Deploy all available forces to the Dominance Nexus, the Sovereign finally ordered. Every vessel, every weapon, every soldier. Whatever this JÖRMUNGANDR is, it cannot withstand the combined might of our entire military. As orders went out across Cathar space, ships of all types began converging on the Dominance Nexus. Battlecruisers were pulled from patrol duties. Training exercises were abruptly terminated as cadets found themselves thrust into actual combat operations. Reserve vessels that hadn't seen active service in decades were hastily recommissioned and deployed. The result was the largest concentration of Cathar military power assembled since the subjugation campaigns 70 years earlier. Over 200 combat vessels formed a defensive perimeter around the Dominance Nexus, supported by thousands of fighter craft and fixed defensive platforms. Ground-based weapons batteries and orbital defense stations added their firepower to the already formidable array. If the JÖRMUNGANDR continued on its current course, it would face the most formidable array of military power ever assembled by the Cathar Dominion. At the center of the defensive formation, aboard the Dominance Nexus itself, Grand Marshal Vexcorp, brother of High Admiral Vexcorp and Supreme Military Commander of the Nexus, supervised the final preparations. Unlike his brother, who had always possessed a certain arrogance regarding Cathar superiority, Vexcorp was a pragmatist. The reports from the surviving vessels of the Third Fleet had shaken him deeply. Status of emergency research teams? He demanded. pacing the central command platform of the Nexus. All teams are working at maximum capacity, Grand Marshal, his chief science officer reported. The data from the Third Fleet engagement is being analyzed for weaknesses in the enemy vessel's design or tactics. And preliminary findings suggest the vessel uses a form of gravitational manipulation technology that exceeds our theoretical understanding. Our scientists report that developing countermeasures within the available time frame is unlikely. Fexcor nodded grimly. He had expected as much. Then we rely on overwhelming force. Status of the defense fleet. Final formations are being established now. First and second fleets have arrived in full strength. Reserves and regional defense forces continue to arrive. Current vessel count stands at 217 combat-capable ships. And the Imperial Sovereign has ordered the deployment of the Royal Guard vessels. They will arrive within the hour. Fexcor's eyes widened slightly. The Royal Guard vessels, 5 specially constructed battleships that served as the personal escort for the Imperial Sovereign, had never been deployed in actual combat. Their presence indicated the severity with which the Imperial Council viewed this threat. Very well. Maintain alert status and continue monitoring the enemy vessel's approach. I want continuous updates on any changes in its course or speed. As his officers carried out their duties, Fexcor moved to a private communication terminal and entered his personal authentication codes. The screen flickered to life, showing the aged but still imposing face of Vorshul, the Imperial Council's chief strategist. "You received my request," Fexcor stated. "I did," Vorshul confirmed, "though I question the wisdom of diverting resources to evacuate non-essential personnel when every vessel is needed for defense. Not diverting resources, utilizing them efficiently. The science and administrative staff serve no combat function. The vessels transporting them away can return to join the battle." Vorshul's expression remained neutral. The Sovereign has not authorized an evacuation. Such an action might be interpreted as lack of confidence. "I am not seeking authorization for a general evacuation," Fexcor clarified. "Merely the relocation of personnel whose presence is not required for the coming battle. A standard security protocol." After a moment's consideration, Vorshul nodded. "Very well. I will authorize the relocation of non-essential personnel under the guise of security protocols. But Fexcor, the Nexus must stand. The psychological impact of its loss would be devastating. Understand. We will defend it to the last warrior." The communication ended, and Fexcor immediately began issuing orders for the security relocation of civilian researchers and administrative staff. He harbored no illusions about the coming battle. If this human vessel could destroy a third of the Third Fleet and neutralize its 3 dreadnoughts without sustaining damage, the chances of stopping it with conventional tactics were slim. But Cathar warriors did not surrender, and they did not flee. They would fight, and they would die if necessary, but they would not yield. Aboard the JÖRMUNGANDR, Admiral Vance studied the tactical display showing the massive Cathar defensive formation surrounding the Dominance Nexus. The concentration of firepower was impressive, even by the standards of the Cathar Dominion. Hundreds of vessels arranged in overlapping defensive layers, supported by fixed installations and fighter squadrons. "They've committed everything," Captain Cade observed, standing beside him. "Every available ship in the sector." "As expected," Vance replied. "The Nexus is both strategically and symbolically important. They cannot allow it to fall without deploying their full strength." "Admiral," Lieutenant Commander Reese spoke up from her tactical station, "our sensors are detecting transport vessels departing from the Nexus. Trajectory analysis indicates they are evacuating personnel." "Interesting. It seems someone in the Cathar command structure is pragmatic enough to save those they can. Identify the vessels and allow them to depart. We have no quarrel with non-combatants." "Yes, Admiral." Vance turned to address the entire command crew. "We are about to engage the largest concentration of Cathar military power assembled in 7 decades. While our technological advantage is significant, we should expect determined resistance. The Cathar will not surrender, regardless of losses." Phase 1 has been completed successfully, he continued. We have demonstrated our capabilities and shattered their perception of invulnerability. Now we proceed to Phase 2, the neutralization of their primary military installation in this sector. Lieutenant Wade, prepare the transmission package. Once we have engaged the defensive fleet, broadcast on all Cathar frequencies. Package ready, Admiral. Vance nodded, then turned to Dr. Ishida. Status of the probability drive? Fully charged and operational, Admiral. Singular event calculation complete. Efficiency projected at 94.7%. Acceptable. Lieutenant Commander Reese, prepare primary and secondary weapons systems for simultaneous engagement. Target distribution as calculated by tactical AI. Systems ready, Admiral. Targeting solutions locked. Vance took a moment to look at each member of his command crew. They had trained for this moment for decades, preparing for a confrontation that most of humanity had given up hope of ever seeing. They were the last warriors of Earth, carrying the legacy of a broken species that refused to accept extinction. For Earth, he said simply. For Earth, they responded in unison. Vance returned his attention to the tactical display. Take us in. Full combat protocol. The JÖRMUNGANDR accelerated toward the waiting Cathar fleet, its dark hull seeming to absorb the colorful light of the nebula around it. As it approached, the Cathar defense forces began to adjust their formation, tightening their lines and preparing for engagement. Enemy fleet is launching fighter squadrons, Reese reported. Estimated 700 craft deployed. Energy readings indicate all capital ships are charging weapon systems. Deploy countermeasures, Vance ordered. The outer hull of the JÖRMUNGANDR shifted, revealing thousands of small apertures. From these poured a cloud of microscopic machines. Not the destructive nanites used against the Third Fleet, but autonomous defensive units designed to intercept incoming fire and fighters. Countermeasures deployed. Shield systems at maximum capacity. The Cathar fleet opened fire. Thousands of energy beams, projectiles, and missiles converged on the JÖRMUNGANDR from all directions. Space itself seemed to warp and distort as the combined firepower of over 200 vessels focused on a single target. The defensive cloud surrounding the JÖRMUNGANDR sprang into action, intercepting missiles and energy beams, sacrificing millions of tiny machines to absorb the incoming assault. Those attacks that penetrated the defensive cloud met the ship's gravitational shield, a field of distorted space-time that bent energy and matter around the vessel. Some impacts were registered, bright flashes against the dark hull as particularly powerful weapons managed to partially penetrate the defensive systems. But the JÖRMUNGANDR continued its advance, seemingly undeterred by the most massive barrage of firepower ever deployed by the Cathar Dominion. Shield status, Vance inquired, his voice calm despite the chaos visible on the tactical displays. Shields operating at 86% capacity, Reese reported. Minimal penetration. Hull integrity at 99.2%. Authorized full weapons release. Primary targets as identified by tactical AI. The JÖRMUNGANDR's response was swift and devastating. Dozens of gravitational beams lanced out simultaneously, each targeting a specific vessel in the Cathar formation. Unlike the previous engagements, where the beams had completely destroyed their targets, these attacks were more precise, targeting propulsion systems, weapons emplacements, and power cores. Cathar vessels began drifting out of formation as their engines failed. Others experienced cascade power failures as their cores were selectively compressed. Weapons systems exploded as gravitational forces tore them apart from within. The formation, so carefully arranged to provide overlapping fields of fire, began to disintegrate as disabled vessels drifted into one another or were forced to take evasive action to avoid collisions. Enemy fleet cohesion is breaking down, Reese reported. Approximately 30% of vessels neutralized or severely damaged. They're adapting, Vance observed. The remaining vessels are adjusting their shield modulations based on observed attack patterns. Confirmed. Effectiveness of standard gravitational attacks reduced by approximately 12%. Vance nodded. The Kthar were nothing if not adaptable in combat. Deploy secondary weapons systems. Vary attack patterns to prevent further adaptation. The Jörmungander's hull shifted again, revealing an entirely different set of weapon emplacements. These fired projectiles similar to those used against the Third Fleet's dreadnoughts. Phase-shifting devices that penetrated shields by briefly existing outside normal space-time. As these new weapons struck their targets, Kthar vessels experienced the same system's failures that had neutralized the Third Fleet. Complete computer core rewrites that disabled weapons while leaving life support and basic propulsion intact. "Admiral," Wade called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the Kthar command vessel." On screen, the tactical display was replaced by the image of a Kthar commander, older and more heavily scarred than Vex Corps had been, but with similar facial structure. "I am Grand Marshal Thex Corps, commander of the Dominance Nexus Defense Forces," the Kthar announced. "I demand to know the purpose of this attack. The Kthar Dominion has not engaged in hostilities against humanity for 7 decades. What do you seek?" Vance studied the Kthar commander for a moment before responding. "Grand Marshal, your species attempted to eradicate mine. You destroyed our home world and hunted our survivors across the galaxy. That debt can never be fully repaid, but today we take the first payment. If it is vengeance you seek, then target those responsible," Thex Corps argued. "The military commanders who ordered the subjugation campaign. The imperial sovereign of that era. Not the rank and file who merely followed orders." "An interesting distinction," Vance replied. "Did you make the same argument when Earth was burning? When human colonies were being systematically eradicated? When children were being hunted through the ruins of their homes?" Thex Corps had no answer. "Broadcast the transmission package," Vance ordered Wade. "All Kthar frequencies." The screen split, showing Thex Corps on one side and the transmission being broadcast on the other. It began with images of Earth, beautiful, blue, alive, followed by historical footage of the Kthar attack. Cities burning, orbital bombardments, refugee ships being destroyed as they fled. The systematic destruction of human military forces and civilian populations alike. Then came newer footage, Kthar expansion into former human territories. The exploitation of resources on worlds once colonized by humans. The destruction of human cultural artifacts and historical sites. The hunting of human survivors, treated as sport by Kthar warriors. Finally, the transmission showed something that made even Thex Corps' scaled skin pale. The construction of the Jörmungander, not the complete vessel, but enough to demonstrate that it had been built in secret over decades, using technology developed specifically to counter Kthar military capabilities. The message was clear. Humanity had been planning this moment for generations. "We do not seek the complete destruction of your species, Grand Marshal," Vance continued as the transmission ended. "Unlike the Kthar, we do not believe in genocide. What we seek is justice and a restoration of balance. And how is this balance to be restored?" Thex Corps demanded. "The Kthar Dominion will withdraw from all territories previously claimed by humanity. You will return to your pre-subjugation boundaries. You will provide reparations for the resources extracted from human worlds. And you will acknowledge, formally and publicly, the crimes committed against our species." Thex Corps' expression hardened. "The Imperial Council will never agree to such terms." "They will," Vance replied with cold certainty. "Because the alternative is the deployment of more vessels like the Jörmungander. We built one to deliver this message. We can build more to enforce it." "You're bluffing," Thex Corps snarled. "If you had more such vessels, you would have deployed them simultaneously." "A reasonable assumption," Vance conceded, "but incorrect. We chose to send a single vessel precisely because it demonstrates our restraint. We could have launched a surprise attack with multiple ships, targeting your core worlds simultaneously. Instead, we chose to give you a chance to witness our capability and respond accordingly." The exchange was interrupted as the tactical display automatically reactivated, showing a new development in the battle. "Admiral," Reese reported urgently, 5 vessels approaching from the far side of the Nexus. Configuration indicates Royal Guard-class battleships. As expected, Vance nodded. the Sovereign's personal fleet. Grand Marshal, it seems your reinforcements have arrived. They will not change the outcome. Thexscore's expression revealed nothing, but his posture had changed subtly, a tension that hadn't been present before. Then we have nothing more to discuss, human. We will fight to the last warrior. The transmission ended. The Royal Guard vessels are deploying in attack formation. Reese updated. Their weapon systems appear to be more advanced than standard Cathar technology. Energy signatures suggest experimental design. Focus defensive systems on countering their attacks, Vance ordered. Maintain neutralization protocol for standard Cathar vessels. The battle intensified as the Royal Guard ships entered the fray. Their weapons, a new type of phased plasma cannon, proved more effective against the JÖRMUNGANDR's defensive systems, causing localized failures in the gravitational shield. Shield integrity at 72%, Reese reported. 2 sections of the outer hull reporting damage. Auto repair systems engaged. Adjust shield harmonics to counter the new weapon type, Vance ordered. Dr. Ishida, analysis? The chief scientist studied the data streaming across his console. The plasma weapons operate on a fluctuating frequency that partially bypasses our gravitational distortion. Adjusting our shield modulators should compensate, but it will require approximately 40 seconds to complete the recalibration. Understood. Tactical, evasive pattern Omega-3. Minimize exposure to the Royal Guard vessels until shields are recalibrated. The JÖRMUNGANDR executed a series of rapid position changes, using its superior maneuverability to avoid the most concentrated fire from the Royal Guard ships. Simultaneously, it continued its methodical neutralization of the regular Cathar fleet vessels. Shield recalibration complete, Ishida announced. Resume primary attack vector, Vance ordered. Target the Royal Guard vessels with focused gravitational lances, maximum intensity. The JÖRMUNGANDR's primary weapons reoriented, concentrating their fire on the 5 elite battleships. The recalibrated shields absorbed the phased plasma with greater efficiency, allowing the ship to weather the incoming fire while mounting its own attack. 3 of the Royal Guard vessels managed to evade the initial gravitational assault, their enhanced engines providing greater maneuverability than standard Cathar ships. The other 2 were not so fortunate. One suffered a direct hit to its power core, resulting in a catastrophic implosion that compressed the entire vessel into a dense mass. The other lost its propulsion systems and weapons, drifting helplessly out of formation. Remaining Royal Guard vessels are adopting a new formation, Reese reported. They appear to be preparing for a coordinated attack on a single vector. They're attempting to concentrate their fire on a specific section of our shield, Vance observed. Compensate by reinforcing the targeted area. The 3 remaining Royal Guard ships accelerated suddenly, placing themselves in a triangular formation that allowed their weapons to converge on a single point. Their phased plasma cannons fired simultaneously, creating a combined beam of devastating power. The JÖRMUNGANDR's shields flared brilliantly at the point of impact, the gravitational distortion struggling to compensate for the concentrated energy assault. Shield integrity at 54% in the targeted section, Reese reported tensely. Structural integrity of the underlying hull at 86% and declining. Initiate the probability drive, Vance ordered calmly. Dr. Ishida's hands moved across his console, activating the JÖRMUNGANDR's most advanced and secret weapon system. Probability drive engaged. Calculating singular event outcomes. The space around the JÖRMUNGANDR seemed to ripple and distort, as if reality itself was being rewritten. The ship appeared to exist in multiple locations simultaneously, each version slightly out of phase with the others. The Royal Guard ship's concentrated attack continued, but now it passed through empty space where the JÖRMUNGANDR had been a moment before. The actual vessel had shifted to a position directly behind the triangular formation, having moved through a probability state where it had never been in its previous location. Probability shift complete, Ishida confirmed. Drive cooling cycle initiated. Target all 3 Royal Guard vessels simultaneously, Vance ordered. Neutralization protocol. Before the elite Cthar ships could react to the Jormungander's impossible maneuver, gravitational lances struck all three from behind. Their enhanced shields provided momentary resistance before collapsing, allowing the gravitational weapons to disable their primary systems. With the Royal Guard neutralized and more than half the regular fleet disabled or destroyed, the path to the Dominance Nexus itself was clear. The massive installation hung in space before them, its defensive systems active but insufficient against the Jormungander's capabilities. "Take us into optimal firing. Position," Vance ordered. "Prepare the primary gravimetric cannon for planetary-scale deployment." The JÖRMUNGANDR moved into position directly above the Dominance Nexus. Its hull configuration changed again, sections shifting to reveal a massive aperture at its core, a weapon designed not for ship-to-ship combat, but for the destruction of entire installations or small moons. "Gravimetric cannon charged and ready, Admiral," Reese reported. "Target locked. Hold fire," Vance commanded. "Lieutenant Wade, open a channel to the Nexus." "Channel open, Admiral." Fexcor appeared on screen again, his command center now showing signs of damage and emergency lighting. "Have you come to accept our surrender, human?" he asked, his tone bitter but dignified. "The Cthar Dominion has never offered surrender in its history," Vance replied. "I would not insult you by expecting it now. Then finish it. We will not beg for mercy. As I said before, Grand Marshal, we are not like you. Complete destruction is not our objective." Vance gestured to Wade, who transmitted a set of coordinates to the Nexus. These coordinates mark a section of the Nexus containing its primary military research facilities and fleet command center. "We will destroy only these sections, leaving the remainder intact. You have 20 minutes to evacuate all personnel from the targeted areas." Fexcor's expression showed confusion, then suspicion. "Why would you show such restraint? What game are you playing?" "No game. A demonstration of difference. The Cthar destroyed Earth completely, killed billions without hesitation. We will destroy only your military capability, leaving your people alive to rebuild and reconsider." 20 minutes, Grand Marshal. The transmission ended. "Admiral," Captain Cade spoke quietly, "many on the Nexus will not believe our warning. They will assume it's a trick. Some will believe," Vance replied. "Some will evacuate. And that distinction is what matters. The Cthar must understand that we could have killed them all, but chose not to. The survivors will carry that message." For the next 20 minutes, the Jormungander maintained its position above the Dominance Nexus. Its sensors detected emergency evacuation procedures being implemented throughout the targeted sections, though as Captain Cade had predicted, many Cthar refused to flee, preferring to die at their posts. "Time elapsed," Wade announced. "Proceed with targeted destruction," Vance ordered. "Minimal collateral damage." The gravimetric cannon activated, sending a precisely calibrated beam of intensified gravitational force into the specified sections of the Dominance Nexus. Unlike the weapons used against ships, this deployment was surgical, collapsing only the targeted structures while leaving surrounding areas intact. The designated sections of the Nexus imploded, compressed by forces that defied Cthar understanding of physics. Research facilities containing weapons designs that could have threatened human settlements for generations were crushed into dense masses no larger than shuttlecraft. Command centers that had coordinated anti-human operations for decades ceased to exist. When the gravitational beam finally deactivated, approximately 30% of the Dominance Nexus had been destroyed, precisely the sections that represented Cthar military power in the sector. The remainder, containing living quarters, medical facilities, and civilian research areas, remained intact though damaged. "Target neutralized," Reese confirmed. "Nexus military capability eliminated." Vance nodded, his expression unchanged. "Broadcast the final message," ordered Wade. "All frequencies, maximum range." The transmission went out not just to the surviving Cthar vessels and the remains of the Nexus, but to every communication system in the sector. It was brief and direct, an image of the Jormungander followed by a simple text message in the Cthar language. "Humanity has returned. This is your only warning. With its message delivered, the JÖRMUNGANDR activated its main drive system. Space distorted around the massive vessel as it accelerated away from the devastated Cthar fleet, moving toward the edge of the Jormungandr Nebula. Set course for Haven Colony, Vance ordered. Standard stealth protocols. Course set. Admiral, Lieutenant Commander Reese confirmed. ETA 14 hours at current speed. As the JÖRMUNGANDR departed, it left behind a scene of unprecedented destruction. The mighty Cthar defense fleet lay in ruins. Most vessels disabled rather than destroyed, their crews alive but humiliated. The pride of Cthar military power in the sector, the dominance nexus, was partially collapsed, its military capacity eliminated while its civilian population largely survived. It was a defeat unlike any the Cthar had experienced in their long history of expansion and conquest. Not just a military loss, but a philosophical one, an enemy that could have destroyed them completely had chosen selective retribution instead. And as reports of the battle spread throughout Cthar space, a sensation foreign to their warrior culture began to take hold. Fear, not just of the JÖRMUNGANDR itself, but of what it represented, a humanity they had failed to eradicate, returning with technology that surpassed their own, and a restraint they themselves had never shown. The galaxy, long accustomed to Cthar dominance, held its collective breath. Species that had bowed to Cthar authority for generations watched in stunned silence as news of the defeat spread through subspace communications. Civilizations that had been planning rebellions for decades suddenly saw an opportunity they had never dared hope for. The long-established order of the galaxy had been shattered by a single ship emerging from the shadows of human defeat. And as the JÖRMUNGANDR vanished once more into the darkness of space, a question echoed across 1,000 worlds. Was it truly alone, or merely the first? At Haven Colony, Governor Elena Vostov stood at her usual place by the viewport, watching the swirling colors of the Jormungandr Nebula. The Cthar mining operations that had been encroaching on their territory for months had abruptly ceased 2 days earlier. The Cthar vessels had simply withdrawn without explanation, abandoning equipment and half-processed materials. Still no response to our communications, Commander Yamamoto reported, joining her at the viewport. It's like they've forgotten we exist. They have more important concerns now, Elena replied softly. What do you mean? Before she could answer, the colony's alert system activated. Unknown vessel approaching, announced the automated warning system. Arrival imminent. Elena's expression remained calm. Let's go to the landing platform, Takashi. But we should be heading to the emergency bunkers, he protested. If the Cthar have returned. It's not the Cthar, she said with certainty. Kulme. They arrived at the colony's main landing platform just as the massive shape appeared in the sky above, a vessel of impossible size and unfamiliar design, its dark hull absorbing the colorful light of the nebula as it descended toward the colony. Despite its enormous mass, it landed with impossible grace on the reinforced platform, settling silently as the colonists gathered at a safe distance, expressions ranging from fear to wonder. A section of the hull reconfigured itself, forming a ramp that extended to the platform surface. At its top stood a tall, silver-haired man in a uniform unlike any the colonists had ever seen. Behind him were several officers, each bearing the same serious expression and purposeful stance. The silver-haired man descended the ramp slowly, his eyes fixed on Elena. When he reached the bottom, he stopped and rendered a perfect military salute. Governor Vostov, he said formally. Admiral Kaido Vance, United Earth Navy vessel JÖRMUNGANDR, the Omega Protocol, has been successfully executed. Elena returned the salute, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Admiral Vance, Haven Colony welcomes you. The beacon that was lit in darkness has been answered. Vance nodded once, then gestured to the vessel behind him. The JÖRMUNGANDR was built for a single purpose, to demonstrate that humanity cannot be erased from a galaxy. That purpose has been fulfilled. And now? Elena asked. Now, Vance replied, allowing a small smile for the first time, we rebuild. The Cthar Dominion has received our message. They will withdraw from human territories. They will provide reparations. And they will never again believe us powerless. You're certain of this? I am. Fear is a powerful motivator, Governor. The Cathar now fear what else we might have created during our decades of apparent submission. They fear what other vessels like JÖRMUNGANDR might be waiting in the darkness. That fear will ensure their compliance. Elena looked past Vance to the massive vessel behind him. And if they eventually overcome that fear, if they rebuild and return, then we will be ready, Vance replied simply. The JÖRMUNGANDR was only the beginning. The knowledge that created it remains. The determination that drove its construction has not diminished. Humanity will never again be caught unprepared. As the colonists of Haven watched in amazement, more personnel began to disembark from the JÖRMUNGANDR. Engineers, scientists, tactical specialists, each carrying the knowledge and skills needed to transform the small colony into something greater. The seed of a new human civilization, protected by the shadow of the great vessel that had changed the balance of power in the galaxy with a single decisive action. Throughout Cathar space, silence fell as the news of defeat spread. Not the silence of death, but the silence of fear, of looking to the darkness between stars and wondering what else might be hiding there, of questioning whether the humans they had tried to eradicate had become something new, something more dangerous than they had ever been before. And in that silence, humanity found its voice again, not in shouts of triumph or cries for further vengeance, but in the quiet, determined work of rebuilding, of creating a future where the balance of power would never again tilt so completely against them. The JÖRMUNGANDR had delivered its message. The galaxy had fallen silent, and in that silence, a new chapter began.